we are going to have to rebel physically against this AI that's coming at us. These guys are out of control, and they're building stuff and no one's watching, and I'm really kind of worried about what I'm seeing. They don't really care about what effects these inventions are going to have on all of us, and we're really heading towards a kind of a surveillance nightmare, in which our own TVs and computers are watching us.
Right.
And when they do build the Terminator, which they are working on, trust me, in these agencies within the black ops and military, they're working on Terminators. They will be out. There will be Terminator cops and Terminator soldiers and Terminator wars and the whole thing.
Well, they're already releasing AI police bots in select cities like San Francisco just to try to test them out there where Google is. And when you go back and you read the technocrats from 100 years ago, like H.G. Wells or Bertrand Russell, Bertrand Russell wrote a famous book called Impact of Science on Society, and another one called The Scientific Outlook. And in both of those, he says that the future will be a technocracy. We will be ruled by essentially some sort of logical computing machines. We'll have credits that are put onto our accounts. We won't have actual cash or gold. All that will be done away with. And it'll all be run from a centralized grid. And every area of life will be managed. It's what's called the managerial society.
The major, huge corporations, Google, Facebook, Apple, their power is going to increase and increase. And this is like a group mind that Google is building.
The global brain is the actual plan of Google and the Pentagon. And what's also revelatory here is the mass depopulation agenda. I mean, we can set aside the fears of the apocalypse. I mean, what's really going on in this movie is that the AI is there to ensure the stamping out of humanity. Bertrand Russell says that the human will, the human spirit has to be stamped out. And that's what they see the machines doing. The real technocrats from 100 years ago saw that. So that's what SKYNET's there for, is to make sure that the human population doesn't just reduce down to 500 million like the Georgia Guidestones say, but actually down to 0. And that's the real future here.
We're slowly going towards a world, and it's not slowly, it's actually quickly going to a world where when you enter a room, the thermostat's going to immediately heat that room up to 70, and then when you leave the room, it's going to turn off.
Right.
And it's going to be watching everything you do, everywhere you go. It's going to be measuring, you're using too much gasoline, you're using too much energy in your house, you need to cut back. They're going to shame you by telling your neighbors how much you're spending on hot water and air conditioning. And this is where we're going. It's already happening in some very liberal cities in this country.
Right, the smart city.
The smart city,
and that's what we get by the end of the series, is this giant smart city, which is where SKYNET lives. The operating system that Technocracy runs on is that there's no free will, that everything is literally deterministic causal chains that cannot be broken.
The scientists actually really believe that we live in this mechanical universe, and it's like Plato's Republic, on steroids, where they're using the machines to make sure that everybody is tightly controlled and the society is going towards this place, but we have nothing to say about it. And only the rich elites seem to have the say about it. And I think that we really have to be cognizant of that, because that is the most dangerous place that we can go. And I think that's what this series is trying to say, that we're heading towards a very dangerous place here, and we're going to lose our free will.
Could the establishment stage a giant cyber attack, that could lead to some sort of global government or something like that? And if we look to the recent Vault 7 WikiLeaks leaks, if you looked at any of those, if you went through any of those, we saw that the CIA had the ability, through their own kind of NSA that they had set up, to spoof cyber attacks from other countries that weren't really there, but it made it look like they were coming from Russia or China. And so essentially they had the ability to create cyber false flags. We know that Stuxnet is admittedly a cyber false flag.
I was actually grateful for that release, Vault 7 release, because it really is a fact that the CIA can attack us from any country on Earth, and we can't trust anything anymore. And I think that I think there is an AI right now, actually, and they just haven't told us. And I think they're hooking it up very slowly so we don't see it. But clearly the satellites are attached to the ground-based, and all attached to whatever systems, nuclear or regular weapon systems that they have. And I think that there's a lot more cooperation at a higher level between countries than we think. I don't think that there's really nearly as much tension between Russia and the United States as they're trying to make it seem. I think that we're all kind of working together on this, China, Russia, and just like in the movies.
Well,
it's international.
Julian Assange said that the internet itself is a giant spying apparatus. And when you look at the history of where it comes from, out of DARPA, which was ARPANET, right, back in the 60s, it was created to be a device for cryptography, for transmitting messages under the aegis of the military. So this is military technology that's been released to the public and then to the whole world. So I think it would be very naive to assume that, you know, the internet that China's using or that Russia's using is not in some way, you know, linked to our internet. And I think that you're right, that it's kind of a theatrical sort of chess game that's being played out, but really the end goal is what we see in the film as SKYNET.
But there are also ramifications that are unseen by the powers that be, because if you look at like when Rome decided to conquer the world 2,000 years ago, they built roads everywhere for their carriages and their chariots, and it was all done for warrior purposes, just like the internet was created for warrior purposes. But the Christians and the early Gnostics used those roads to convert people all over the place. So, and I think that's what's also going on with the internet, is people are using the highways built by the military to actually go against the military, to actually preach against this thing. Because he was educated ahead of everybody about what was happening, he began the rebellion. And I think there's a good argument to say that there's a rebellion going on within the intelligence services and the military against what we're going through even right now. People who are aware of what's going on and maybe they don't like it.
A long time ago, they had put backdoors into all computers, and that this is actually installed at the hardware level at the factories, which makes a lot of the big companies suspect themselves, right? Intel inside, right? Intelligence inside your computer. So I think that we're getting the kind of information here that William Binney talks about, the famous NSA whistleblower who actually designed the programs for the backdoors and the 3D modeling of all of virtual reality and so forth for the NSA, and Edward Snowden, you know, in his PRISM program that he talked about.
Castellaro.
Castellaro, right.
Yeah. All those guys were finding out that there were, back in the 90s, they were sticking trapdoor programs into every single piece of software that was coming out so that they could get in anytime they wanted. And we now know this is all true, and it was just rumors then.
Well, James Bamford in 1983 wrote The Puzzle Palace, one of the first books on the NSA, and he said back then that they had this capability, which is phenomenal to me. You know, our tech devices that we all carry as the means by which the awakening of SKYNET happens. And so they actually have all of the humans opting into it. You have to opt into it, right?
Wow.
And if you opt into it, then it sort of transfers the right for SKYNET to rule, right, over to this ethereal AI entity.
And that seems to be also one of the rules of the Illuminati, that they have to get you to tacitly agree to their plan, or the plan cannot be executed. So that's very interesting. They're advancing a narrative that we all need to think about.
Like Ex Machina and Her, the Spike Jonze film. Both of these contain the same warning, the same narrative or threat of everybody opting into this system through reliance and being a slave to their tech devices, and that this will actually have consequences in the future for our progeny. Human free will versus technocracy. I mean, that's the overriding theme. And the third installment and the fourth installment, I think, explicitly make reference to depopulation. They talk about the plan of the technocrats and their evil offspring AI, right, being there to ensure that depopulation takes place. And so I see it as that. I see it as Platonic. I see it as a kind of Gnostic sort of being outside of the predetermined limits and bounds of time through some sort of a rebellion on the part of the human spirit.
Yeah, the demiurge is the SKYNET.
Yeah, exactly.
And the rebellion among the Sophionic masses is coming through John Connor and his mom, who starts the whole thing going. So the whole thing does have a kind of a Gnostic overlay to it, a deep, dark warning also about where we're headed.
Join us again next time on Hollywood Decoded. I'm Jay Dyer.
And I'm Jay Widener.